You are listening to Scott H. Silverman's Happy Hour, a podcast released on the first 3 Wednesdays of the month. Family crisis, relationship crisis, addiction crisis, no two crisis situations are the same. They vary by family, individual, and relationship. They can encompass complex family dynamics, emotional distress, anger issues, and entitlements, and often involve substance abuse. This podcast addresses these issues and others surrounding the addiction epidemic currently plaguing this country and the world. There is hope and help.
Are you stuck, scared, or unsure of what to do next? If a situation with a loved one, spouse, or even a child has started to spiral, possibly becoming dangerous or threatening, it's time to seek help. My name is Scott H. Silverman. I help families navigate crisis situations. I'm the person you turn to in order to get you and your loved ones unstuck.
Welcome back to the show. This is Scott H. Silverman's Happy Hour. I'm Michael Glenn Moore. Scott, what's going on today?
Well, today, the air temperature here in San Diego is up a little bit, Michael, and my thoughts and prayers are with everybody in Florida. I'll tell you what a mess that's been watching that. And one of my wife's, as a side note, bucket list is to go to Santa Fe, New Mexico and ride a hot air balloon. Well, that came off the list today.
Oh, yeah.
You know, thoughts and prayers for that family and their friends. So, you know, tough times out there. So anyway, Scott H. Silverman's Happy Hour. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you all. And I got a haircut since our last recording. Michael thought I was looking too much like a hippie, so I checked with my kids.
Hippy-dippy.
Yeah, my kids agreed, but they said, be careful because there's so little left. Be careful, be careful. Anyway, just again, my phone number for those of you who know it's okay to ask for help, 619-993-2738. Please call or text me anytime. And don't worry about what time of day it is, where it is in the country or the world, because my phone gets put up at night, so you won't be waking me up. But it's always nice to wake up to know that someone's reaching out for help, and I'll do everything I can to be a resource. Well, today we have one of, I don't know, I guess you'd call it one of our nation's heroes. I don't know a way to put that, any other way to put that. Laura Stack actually participated in my book, The Opioid Epidemic. And we never actually got a chance to meet until after she got included. So clearly you're good buddies with Judith. I said, Judith, I need to talk to Laura. She says, well, I think she's got a wedding coming up. She's going to be very busy. We spoke, and I think you did say I got a wedding. We'll talk. I said, we may be in print by then. We were delayed a little bit with COVID. So anyway, I'm excited today to hear more detail about Laura and get a chance for all of you to hear as well. So quick couple of things about her. MBA, CSP, CAPE. Is the founder and CEO of Johnny's Ambassadors, Inc., which was formed in 2020 after her 19-year-old son, Johnny, died by suicide from a delusional incident after using potent marijuana dabs. Johnny's Ambassadors work together to educate parents and teens about dangers of today's high-THC marijuana on adolescent brain development, mental illness, and suicide. Prior to advocacy work, Laura was a 30-year award-winning professional speaker, spokesperson, author with 8 best-selling productivity books. Her platform now brings education, awareness, prevention, curriculum to parents, healthcare conferences, community groups, schools to raise awareness of THC use, mental illness, and suicide. Described as a woman with unstoppable drive, unwavering purpose, Laura is determined to get teens to stop dabbing. I'm a lot of those things. I'm just not as bright as she is, haven't done it professionally as long, but I aspire to be a Laura. Laura, impressive background. And I can't tell you how sorry I am for your loss. And I can't even imagine as a parent what it's like to have lost a child. So on that note, let me introduce Laura Stack. And Laura, tell us about whatever you think we need to hear from you about you as a person, your family, why you're doing what you're doing, and everything we should know about Johnny.
Wow. Well, that's a lot to unpack. Thank you for that very kind introduction, Scott. And I do believe everything that I've done in the professional world prepared me for this and led me to this. And now has a new platform for Johnny to get his warning and his message out to the world. I've understood events and speaking and social media and webinars and all of the tools that I had in my toolbox that now I can take out and help save our youth from the harms of today's marijuana. A lot of people don't think marijuana is harmful. They think, oh gosh, it's just a plant. It's natural. I used it when I was a kid. It's just weed. It's safe. It's medical. All of the things that we've heard. And sadly, most of them haven't set foot into a dispensary in the past few years. I live in Colorado, where marijuana was legalized medically in 2000 and the first state to legalize it recreationally in 2012. At the time, Johnny was 12 years old. And when it really hit the markets and became commercialized, it was 2014, and he was a freshman in high school. And his friend's brother was a senior and had gotten a med card. That's a medical marijuana, what we call a red card here in Colorado, which you basically have to find a doctor they call pot shop doctors and pay them a few $100, tell them you have some sort of pain, a migraine, back pain, something that can't be proven. And you get your magic card, which entitles you to go into a dispensary at 18 years old and legally buy marijuana. Well, what's happened over the years is that marijuana has become more and more and more potent. I'm not a prude. I mean, I used marijuana when I was a teen. Back then, we called it grass. You know, it was basically Easter grass. I mean, you rolled it in a joint and you smoked it, and it had between 2 and 5% of the psychoactive ingredient called THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. Today, about 30% of the products in dispensaries sold in Colorado are no longer plant matter. They are called concentrates. So the chemists strip the plants out and leave just the THC and distill it, filter it, concentrate it, put it in different products that range anywhere from 60 to 99% pure THC. So these chemicals are very different from what most parents think about when they think of marijuana. And they don't realize the dangers that they pose to the mental health of children. Long story short, Johnny, in the 5-year period since he started marijuana and died by suicide, used these high potency concentrates and became psychotic. His diagnosis in the mental hospital was THC abuse severe. He thought the mob was after him. He thought that his university was an FBI base. He thought everybody knew everything about him, and thought he was being pursued by organized crime, and sadly jumped off the roof of a building. So I am now, dedicating my life to warn other parents about these new products and how they are affecting our children. And it's not just here in Colorado, it's happening everywhere it's legal. More and more states are legalizing. And too many parents think that it's okay. Some of them even provide marijuana to their children. And we want them to really understand the research. There is a ton of research. The marijuana industry, wants people to believe it's harmless. So there is a very false narrative out there that we actively are fighting here in Colorado, and just succeeded in getting a law signed. I stood with Governor Polis just 2 days ago in the governor's mansion while he signed House Bill 1317, regulating marijuana concentrates to protect our 18 to 20-year-olds and make it harder for them to go in and buy these shatters, waxes, dabs that are destroying their minds, causing psychosis, causing depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, and sadly, We now saw just a few days ago by the National Institutes of Health, they proved there is a correlation between marijuana usage and suicide in young adults. So that's our mission, Scott. That is quite a mouthful, but there was nothing wrong with Johnny before. And then when he got his medical marijuana card at 18, it just kind of became a rite of passage here in Colorado. He was a 4.0 student. He had a perfect SAT score in math. He was funny, charming, a brown belt in karate, played the piano and the guitar, played soccer. I mean, he was just your normal, regular kid who had a very bright future ahead of him. And I know without a doubt that if it hadn't have been for the marijuana, if we hadn't have lived here in Colorado, or if House Bill 1317 would have been in place just 5 years ago, I think my son would still be here with us today.
So that's what you do on Monday and Tuesday. What do you do the rest of the week? My goodness.
It's
so let me ask you a question.
Obsession.
Let me ask you a question, because my book's called The Opioid Epidemic, and I know we talked briefly, and where's the parallels, and here's where I think a big part of how not only can we help each other, but you can help people that I try to serve. I get it from the parents all the time. You just described the ideal child that every parent wants, and then how does a child, and I use the word child loosely, but young person, immature person in their 20s, but the information highway has been around for a long time, and so how do we help empower? My big thing now is education, prevention, and inform. How do we educate and help prevent and inform and give this kind of empowerment to young people and to families? So when they have these conversations, when something gets introduced in their life, before they go too far with it. I mean, in the opioid epidemic, which is fascinating, unfortunately, with counterfeit medication, is somebody can do it on a one-off and expire because of fentanyl. And California just became a legal state for marijuana, and are watching in the Northwest. I think it's Oregon just decriminalized everything. And it's been since January, I believe. And now they're already panicking because nobody remembered to put money aside for treatment. So, everyone's walking around like zombies now going, nobody can touch us and you can't put us away and we can do whatever we want. And they don't know what the long-term effect's going to be. But, in Colorado, because you guys went first, and, Kevin, Sabat, we talked about it. I heard him first speak. The marijuana legalization industry is going to go the same route that the tobacco industry did. And hopefully we can study it quicker and get, some controls in a place so we don't lose millions of young people. Because that's the path. So the question is, how do we empower? How do we educate, and how do we inform in a way that we can really leverage and get out there in a way where we can help people, because kids are going to do what kids are going to do. I believe that. I mean, I'm an unlicensed pharmacist. I'm a guy in long-term recovery, and nobody could tell me I was invincible. And I remember my mom, when she first caught me, I said, well, it sure beats drinking alcohol like you and dad do on Friday. And that was when THC was in that 3 to 5% range. So it was nothing. So how do we help people? Let's start with parents. How do we help parents have a conversation with their children? What's been your experience that works?
Well, you mentioned Kevin Sabat, and Kevin actually wrote the foreword to my new book, my 9th book, which will hit bookstores on July 10th, which you may not know symbolically is 7/10, which is International Dab Day. If you take the word oil and flip it upside down on your calculator, some high person figured out that looks like a 7/10. So 7/10 day is to concentrates, as 4/20 day is to marijuana. So on Dab Day, I will be releasing the dangerous truth about today's marijuana, Johnny Stack's life and death story. And Kevin Sabat from SAM wrote the foreword to that. So fortunately, I'm very well acquainted with him, and we've got some partnership plans in place. And I have to just push back a little. I don't think kids will be kids. I don't think that children who actually know and are given the respect, the information, the neuroscience, the data on what is actually happening to their brains, if we come to them as parents who are not saying, you're not allowed to do this and this is bad and don't you ever do this in my house, right? But to talk with them very as, intelligent young people who can grasp the concepts of science and explain to them what happens when you use THC. How does it affect the brain? How does it bind to neurotransmitters? What are cannabinoid transmitters, CB1, CB2? Where are they located in our brains? What's supposed to be happening in your brain as you grow? What happens instead when you use marijuana? How does it alter the structure of the brain? What are the outcomes of use, short-term and long-term? What can it do to you? I think that we simply don't know as parents. If you're not prepared to have a conversation with your child outlined as I just described it, you are not educated enough about marijuana. It is everywhere. It is at every party. It is in middle school, shockingly. 10% of middle schoolers here in Colorado use, and half of our high schoolers use. It is going to be an epidemic very quickly. Pandora's box is burst wide open, Scott, and it is now officially the gateway drug. We know from the Centers for Disease Control from 2019 with their Youth Behavioral Risk Survey that marijuana use, lifetime marijuana use, is the number one predictor of whether a high school senior will have abused opioids in the past 30 days. So let me say that again. The number one predictor that a high school student will abuse opioids in the past 30 days is lifetime marijuana use, not alcohol, not anything else that was measured, marijuana. So what's really critical to understand is that marijuana has now surpassed alcohol as the number one prevalent substance that high schoolers use prior to abusing opioids. So it's extremely problematic. This was just reported in 2020 when I was starting my nonprofit 6 months after my son had died. I was still reeling, trying to understand what had happened. And I think that if you're over 25, you don't know enough about marijuana. Come down here to Colorado and go into a dispensary. You will see suppositories with THC, tampons, salad dressing, soda. Any way you can get THC into an orifice, it has been invented, and your kids are using it, and you won't have any idea. They can refill any e-cigarette cartridge. If you don't know why your kid might have an unraveled paperclip, why your creme brulee torch is missing, why are there half cut off cans of soda, little pieces of foil? If you just aren't aware of this as a parent, then that's why your kids are using, because it's so easy to hide.
So if I'm
have
hearing,
to start young. We've got to, as parents, we've got to talk to them when they're 8, when they're 10, when they're 12. See, your kids just don't, if you don't know, they're not going to know. If you don't say anything, it implies consent. If you're using it, mothers, it's been proven that your child will be 80% more likely to use if the mother uses, and 90% more likely to smoke marijuana if the father uses marijuana. So either not saying something or implying, I did it when I was a kid. It's just weed. It can't hurt you. Your child is going to use. You must come down on the side of absolutely no brain altering substances until you are legal. And even then at 21, your brain is still forming. If you have to use marijuana, wait until you're 28, because that's when we know that your brain is done forming and the harms aren't as great. And maybe if they actually reach 28, they won't do it.
They'll be well. So let me make sure I'm understanding you correctly. So if I'm hearing you correctly, what I think I'm hearing is the parents should inform themselves first. The parents should have the conversation with their child, and by exchanging this information, because I'm not saying kids aren't bright. All I'm saying is that kids
they don't know.
Invincible.
They're not being taught. There is no education in our schools. There is no education by the parents. The kids are out there with this predatory addiction for profit industry who must addict them when they're young. You know, it's not like all of a sudden when you're 30, you're going to go, gee, I want to go smoke marijuana. That's not where they start. The majority of our users here, right? A very, very small percentage of people use the majority of the products. So they got to hook them when they're young. Addiction is an adolescent onset disease. And so if we don't know, or we turn a blind eye, or we encourage it, my God, there are people buying pot for their children for their stress, not understanding it makes depression, it causes depression, makes anxiety worse, can cause mental illness like psychosis. It doesn't happen to anyone, but it happens to 1 in 6. You want to line up 6 of your kids and one of them's that's like playing Russian roulette. Why would you ever take the chance? It's just not worth the risk. So it is incumbent on the parent to get savvy about this. We have now in 1 year, 3,000 of Johnny's ambassadors around the country, and they're just shocked. I did one Facebook post, Scott, and it got 20,000 shares. I mean, I've been in business for 30 years and I've been trying to do that, and I haven't been able to do that. And the post was basically, what's dabbing? And all the comments were, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like that's where parents are coming from. So we have created with Johnny's ambassadors more education than you can possibly absorb. I'm a productivity expert in my former life, still apply that to this nonprofit, which is a business. But we every Friday provide a webinar with an expert, an MD, a psychiatrist, some sort of chemist or drug expert, someone in the field. We have 80 hours now of on-demand video content with experts. We have toolkits, we have videos, we have an online curriculum that takes, it's 8 modules, takes 2 hours. We have one version for teens and one for adults. We're working to get that into schools and youth groups and community groups and clubs all over the United States. We do a walk in September. This will be our 2nd annual, September 19th. Stopdabbingwalk.com. We're trying to get 100 teams around the country to promote Stop Dabbing for Suicide Prevention Month.
Will you explain dabbing so people that have they've heard it, they thought, maybe it's like putting a chip in a dip.
Yeah. So you take the plant, right? You take some weed and you run a solvent through it, like butane or ethanol or any kind of solvent. And the THC that's contained in what are called the trichomes of the plant burst, they fall away, and the solvent and the raw THC leave the plant material. Okay, then you throw away the plant because that's not needed anymore. So the nature part gets tossed, and now you have the psychoactive ingredient and the butane, whatever the solvent is, incredibly poisonous. So now you have to filter it and strain it, further process it, dry it out, and in a tray, it looks like earwax or beeswax. So it's a very bronze colored, sticky type of substance, and it's further distilled and processed into different products. So they tend to name the product by how it looks. So butter, Budder, literally looks like butter. Shatter looks like glass that will break. There's live rosin. There's all sorts of products like oils. They'll further refine. And now you can put those in, sneak them in little cartridges with a dab pen. So let's say you have an 80% dab that you put into a pen. And let's say there's, you buy a gram of that, and there's 200 servings in a cart, it's called, that you have in your pen. So every time you hit that, it's 4 milligrams of THC, and the kids hit it all day long. When they wake up, during class, at lunch, right? When they're passing, it's just real quick. There was a hit, 4%, right? If you eat a brownie, that's 10 milligrams of THC. So they're hitting this pen all day long. So these dabs, they call them dabs because you just need a little bit of dab, like a dab on the needle. You take a little needle and you heat up your dab rig or your device, whatever you're using. You get a blowtorch, heat it to a very, very high temperature, tap the dab onto it, and you inhale as it sizzles the vapors that come off of that concentrate. So you have to forget about plants, right? There's no plant. They're not using that. I mean, some of them still smoke flower, but even the flower in Denver, our potent flowers, 28% THC. 31 grower boasts that he has cultivated a 40% THC flower. So anything above 10% THC is considered a hard drug. It's illegal overseas. But in Colorado, you can't even buy a low potency flower. All of the THC has been cultivated to be extremely high. But the concentrates, when you dab, so concentrate, dabs are to marijuana like crack is to cocaine. If you think about it like that.
So that is a lot of information. Now I must now, but now I wonder, I don't wonder anymore what I sound like when I talk to people, because that's how I come at my subject matter as well. And, having someone who can bring that kind of information forward, because, as you probably have learned and in your short time with this, because my guess would be a couple of years ago, this was not on your radar to study and learn.
Well, not until I discovered, after Johnny's first suicide attempt, a kit in his drawer that said nectar kit on it, and saw this brown beeswax stuff. And my husband and I just looked at each other and said, "What is this?" And 14 months later, he was dead. So we are trying to keep other teens from following Johnny's path. We are trying desperately to get the word out about the linkage between adolescent marijuana use, mental illness, and suicide because of the problems in the brain, right? So it's not like alcohol where you have liver problems, and smoking where it's cardiovascular. All of these dabs, these edibles, vaping, the shatters, the waxes, all of that is affecting their brains. And unless we do a better job as parents educating ourselves and educating our children, we are going to lose many, many generations of children, Scott, as Big Pot follows in Big Tobacco's footsteps. And if we are not careful, it'll be another 60 years before we clamp down. And hopefully now that Colorado is leading the way in making some changes, and we're recognizing some of the mistakes that we made, and we are backpedaling very quickly. We just funded $1 million in our bill to come up with a recommendation for a potency cap. Next year, we'll be coming forward with more legislation and recommending a scientific number to stop these very toxic, very poisonous concentrates.
Well, and I hope you guys move quickly. Just 2 weeks ago, our governor, we have we have 50% of the homeless in California, 50% in the whole country, and it's out of control. And obviously with marijuana just being legalized, we're in San Diego, we're a border town, methamphetamine, we've got fentanyl, counterfeit medication, and the governor just, he's actually on a recall bid now, and they've got enough signatures.
Good.
He announces 2 weeks ago. Wait, listen. He announces 2 weeks ago that they've not only earmarked, but they're going to distribute $100 million statewide. You ready for this? To help the marijuana industry get their licensing and their pathways moving forward, so they can do it the right way in a timely manner. Anyway, I've got 2 more questions, but then I have to wrap up. Question 1. What have we not asked you today? And you don't even need to be asked questions. You have this stuff. I can't wait one day. This is a joke, a metaphor, taking a long trip in a motorhome with you where we're locked in together but you and I talking to each other is important, but getting the message out to others is even more important. I want to find a way to be a resource for you. So first question, what is it I haven't asked you, or you forgot to share or didn't share, that we should cover before we sign off?
Well, the important thing is that you can't do this, and I can't do this. That's why we call it Johnny's Ambassadors. We need thousands and thousands of ambassadors, all the people listening today, to be out in their communities, giving presentations in the library, with the law enforcement, talking to coalitions, going to schools. And that's really where we need to empower people with press releases, with PowerPoint presentations, with education that they can then take out. This has got to be a real grassroots movement to educate, because we just don't have enough time to do it. Johnny's Ambassadors wants to be the MAD of marijuana eventually. So that's our plan. We need a lot of people and would love for them to join us. Our website is johnnysambassadors.org. If they put /join, myriad ways to get involved. But Scott, we've got to have a small army of people out there helping to spread the word.
Okay. Last question. If you had a magic wand, what would you do with it?
I would go back to 1985, before all of this went out of control, and started doing better government research around THC, and had some good evidence before the big legalization movement started, so that just as you can't buy cigarettes until you're 21 and you can't drink until you're 21, we shouldn't be allowing 18, 19, 20-year-olds medically to use marijuana. We must wait until their brains are formed to mitigate some of the harms that we're seeing.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike. I got one more comment, though. Michael always has the best question of the session. I was just on a big webinar, and I know that we work with veterans in our outpatient program.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversation about people, and you saw Johnson & Johnson's award, 240 million or something, 230 million, and now the supply of Oxycontin is going to be completely probably cut off, and a lot of people are addicted. Where are they going to go? The VA is talking nationally, potentially, about considering marijuana as a substitute or a replacement.
And it's just a lie. When you look at the figures in Colorado, that's the bill of goods we were sold. Legalize and, it'll help with the epidemic and the opioid crisis. All of the deaths, all of the use, all of the addiction of every drug, without exception, has shot up in Colorado. So that's the big lie. Marijuana is good for PTSD. It's not. That's been proven. We have the science, and I'm happy to share the articles. So the VA is another just idiot agency that is going to put people on an incredibly addicting substance.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they have a $280 billion budget, and they're their second highest funded piece of any federal line item in the country. Anyway, Michael, I know you've got the best question to ask Laura. What is it?
Well, I'm not sure if it's the best question. Once again, Laura, I totally agree with you with the aspect of being a certain age and being allowed to partake in marijuana. I think that's very important. I mean, if you're 18, you're still a child. If you're 21, you're still a child. although you'd be called an adult. I think it's like the 27 mark is when your brain
is
finally,
done forming.
right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
something that's going on in my state, Louisiana, medical marijuana is recently new, and they've kind of said that we will not okay or sell you the plant itself. You have to buy edible of some sort. And to me,
Mhm.
that seems like that's from what you've been saying, that's hugely wrong. It should not
It's
be
a
like
big
that.
problem.
So,
People don't understand edibles. They digest very slowly. They think they're not working, so they take more. And we have so many poisonings in Colorado, people in the emergency room because they misuse edibles and don't understand them.
so if you had to, okay, one or the other, would you rather that someone smoke if they just absolutely have to, and
There's
they're
no
adult?
difference. THC is THC is THC. It does not matter the delivery mechanism. It metabolizes differently. I think edibles are potentially more dangerous if people don't understand how to titrate them and they're not taking the right dose. And listen, I'm not anti marijuana, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. There are FDA approved uses for marijuana for medicine for people who have rare seizure disorders and for severe cases of autism. I mean, there are things for which it works, but you shouldn't be able to, as an 18-year-old, lie that you have a migraine, get a card, go buy 90% shatter and mess your brain up, because you shouldn't have access to those things in the first place.
Absolutely. Okay, so do you have a quote to see us out for today's show?
Well, I've been using a quote since I started Johnny's Ambassadors: to forge ahead despite your pain and give meaning to your loss.